I think everything under the sun was explored. There was everything from every character that's ever been in NCIS and in LA and in New Orleans and Hawaii and Sydney all coming together for a huge scene. I mean, that was even put out there as a potential, but logistically, these things are really tough, to get together. And so when we ended up deciding on having the character of Tony come back, it all made a lot of sense to us. This character that had been really close with Jimmy, in addition to being close with Ducky, he was Jimmy's good friend. So when he comes to visit, it is to help the person who's left behind, as opposed to honoring Ducky, which everyone else is doing as well. It's really to be there for his friend. I believe that was actually an idea from Stephen Binder, one of our showrunners, who said, I believe he pitched that to the network. So once he did, he said, they like that, and I like that, and so I put that in the scene, and it was wonderful because I'd never been able to write for Tony before. But I've been such a big fan of that character. I'm a huge fan of Torres. I'm a huge fan of McGee, of Casey, of Knight, of Parker, Vance, all of our current lineup that I've been able to write for. But there's something different about his voice that I've never been able to explore before. So it was nice to be able to write for him. Much in the same way where I never got to write for David while he was on our show, because by the time I started writing on our show, he was appearing less frequently. So it was nice, actually. Within this show, even though David didn't get to speak the words, I got to write his words that were in the report, and it was, obviously Gary Cole was his voice for that, but you can do a lot worse than having Gary Cole as your voice. It was great. It in an odd way, it felt like, an old pair of shoes, where that just feels comfortable, an old jacket, and you're like, oh, this still fits. This is great, and I love it, and I miss it in a way, Again, this is all with the caveat that I am beyond happy with the dynamic and everything that we have within our set right now. It's beautiful, but also to pay homage and to pay to basically lift up the people that came before us. There's a lot of people that built this show that aren't on this show anymore, and we really, that what we have now, we're standing on their shoulders, and we owe a lot to them, to a lot of people that came before us, and to be able to spend time with him again. I mean, Michael's been my friend for years, and I love spending time with him, but it's been a long time since I've done a scene with him. So it was really wonderful. I welcomed it, and I was happy that we actually got it to work, because it's hard. He lives on the East Coast, and we, getting him out here and doing all this stuff under the cover of secrecy in the dead of night sort of thing. It was really cool, but we talked about it for a few months, leading up to it. Well, the great part about the character of Tony is that he's probably one of the only ones in the history of our show who could deliver a drawn-out Ducky diatribe, as he's putting a bow tie on Palmer, and have it make any sort of sense, and it's just him being a goofball. But that's one of the really strong points of his character, is that he that humor that he has belies this very serious undertone that Tony's always had, and to see through the tears of the clown when he occasionally takes that clown mask off and you can see through it. It's powerful, and that's been a really cool part of the history of NCIS, and I'm glad that we got to bring it back for a scene. I can say that there's no the only things that in that shot that we'll see in the future from here on out is we have Ducky's journals up top, that Jimmy's going to be keeping up there, and hopefully our team will use that as Ducky's encyclopedia in the future. And then down below, we see the Mallard train in its rightful place once again, back in Autopsy. The piece of paper, honestly, is a handwritten eulogy that I wrote, and for Jimmy to give to Ducky. So as Parker asks, or I think it was Knight asking, "Are you ready to give the eulogy?" And it came pretty easily. It's just Jimmy going over to look at it and kind of reconnect with it before he's interrupted by someone behind him calling him Autopsy Gremlin. I did not write this in a vacuum, far from it. So my co-writers, Scott Williams, who's executive producer on the show and a dear friend, and also was brilliant at writing the character of Ducky, and always has been. So it was wonderful that I was asked to come join him to partner up with him once again. This is the third time that I've worked together with him. I was honored to come in and tell one last Ducky story. It was so when they asked me to come do that, I said yes, absolutely. And it wasn't, not that much time had passed. David passed away in the end of September, and the end of the strike was right then in October. So it was probably only a couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks, and we started up and realized, okay, here's what what our pitch was let's have a case where it thematically links up with the themes of loss, and it thematically links up with Ducky in some capacity, and what our team is feeling, and also it links up with the stories that we leave behind when we lose someone, and how those stories really matter, and this girl who's going off to college, her father one day is a war hero and the next day is some drug-addled deserter, and how that really matters to people who are left behind, and how we view them, how we remember them, it really matters a lot. So so long as we're going to tell a story, an hour-long story of what we remember about this character, that's what really matters. Well, there was a lot more clips put into this initial script, and I think that Scott Williams and I both wanted to kind of overload it a little bit, because we wanted to put in as many as possible. And then between our wonderful director Michael Zimberg and our editor Greg Gauntz and our showrunners and the network as well, so many people go into making this thing that we wanted to give as many options as possible, so that people could kind of say, oh, that one really hits me there, that one really gets me too. And that particular one you just said was from an episode called Ignition. I think it was like season 3 or 4, something like that. And it was based off of this cool little photo that was on the back by Ducky's desk, which was taken by one of our executive producers, Mark Horowitz, who's a terrific photographer, of me and David standing, proudly next to this little ATV. And so seeing that, I don't know whether it was Michael Zimberg, our director, or Greg, who pulled that clip and said, we need to have that little clip right in there, just as a quick flash, a quick memory. And what I enjoyed about that, the flashbacks within this, is that it doesn't necessarily need to be a drawn out 2 to 3 minute scene in order to be a memory, because that's not how memories work. Especially when you lose someone, sometimes it's just, a brief memory of someone's smile, or the smell in the air when you went and did something together, something like that, or the fear that you felt when you were riding on the back of this ATV, and it can be brief. So I think the way that it was crafted by our editor was absolutely wonderful. Yeah, there was a couple must includes for me that I said I really want the episode Detour to be featured, just because the two of us are running through the woods, and I think Scott said, well, if you're talking to Jessica, and you guys ran through the woods and were chased down one time, we can maybe draw a parallel there. And I thought that was very fun. So and then the other one that was a must for me, like when I sat down at the writer's room table the first day, I said, there's going to be the last clip that I want to play in this thing, and I think it's the most fitting, is from the episode written by Stephen Binder called "Face the Strange," where Jimmy is mourning the loss of Gibbs and the loss of Bishop, and before that, the death of his wife. And that day that I worked with David, he just knocked it out of the park. You know, it was one of those days where he wasn't with us too often at that point, maybe only a couple episodes per season, but he came in and just delivered this beautiful, beautiful scene, saying that our pain is a small price to pay for his peace. You know, he seemingly, like, in this flashback will eulogize himself. And that one, you know, got me emotional just thinking of it. And I said, okay, that's the other must-have as well. The great part about this thing, as I said earlier, is that it's such a team effort. And because I think were it not a team effort and it's just like, hey, go write a script, I would have been just a bucket of tears, you know. I was grieving my friend, you know. But the great part was that I had Scott there to, you know, he was an incredible writer, and also I had everyone else in the writer's room who also lost a friend. You know, I don't live in a vacuum. I'm not the only one who feels things about this, right? But there was definitely specific instances and specific times while writing. You know, we'd be in Scott's room and we're tossing a ball back and forth and we're talking about things. We're seeing what's going to go up on the board, what's going to happen. And there'll be just something that hits me about it. And usually it's something where you, oh, that's good. Let's write that down. And then I think about the narrative of it and how it works. And it gets me choked up because I'm thinking of David, you know, and how parallel David and Ducky are in certain ways, and how paralleled our relationships were, you know, Jimmy and Ducky versus myself and David, in certain ways. Yeah, it got to me. It definitely got to me. And in fact, in the midst of this, you know, I went out for his memorial service at the beginning of January in New York, and talking to his family and stuff about this episode, and I really hope they love it. Yeah, it got very emotional for me. In fact, the cold open scene where Jimmy comes in and finds Ducky, man, I was just a bucket of tears. That's just what it was for me, you know. And thankfully, I have Michael Zimberg there as a wonderful director to help craft it and mold it and shape it, so it's not just a dude coming through the door and crying right away. So, but yeah, in the end, I think it was an interesting way to process grief and loss, was through writing about it almost instantly. Everyone just stepped up in a huge way. I think everyone knew how important this show was because of how important David was and how important Ducky was as well, you know. And I swear every single person in this cast, not just in this cast, in this crew as well, we were all sharing stories. We were talking about him a lot. And yeah, there was a shared sense of ownership of this show, and also a shared sense of duty to say, you know, as NCIS tries to honor our fallen servicemen and women, you know, like, this is our opportunity to honor one of our own, you know, that we've acted alongside for the last 2 decades, and it was very meaningful for us. Yes, there's a few things that are suitable for public discourse, and a few that are not. But I'd say one of the most important things that he always kept in mind. I remember one time we were doing this expository scene where we're talking about the findings we have from a certain autopsy, and he had a mouthful. He had a lot to say in this one particular scene, and between takes, he was like, kind of looked down and started smiling quite a bit. And I said, are you Are we pretty happy with ourselves here? What's going on, David? He goes, Brian, I make this shit sound so good. Okay, I'll give that to you another way in case you want to edit around it. Brian, I make this sound so good. And he was smiling, and I started laughing around along with him a little bit. And he said, "We always have to remember that this is entertainment. You know, we can come in here and we can just deliver findings, blah 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 blah, just the facts, ma'am, or we can try to make this entertainment for people." And he understood that that's what we're doing for a living. We're there as entertainers, and we're there to make people's days brighter when they get home from work and they want to, you know, spend some time with their family and watch their favorite show together, or you just want to have a beer and relax after work, something like that. That the entertainment aspect of it can never be lost. And even if it's talking about fingerprint analysis or the gunshot wounds in a victim, there has to be something to it that makes it entertaining and makes it accessible for people to watch week to week. And that's he and that mentality is a huge reason why this show is successful. I think one thing that with that relationship that I think both Katrina and I expressed when they came to us and said, "Hey, you know, we'd like to do this thing," is and both of us were totally on board. We said we want to see like a good and healthy relationship. How about one where like people talk to each other as adults, you know, and because you know the trope across a lot of television is will they, won't they, will they, won't they, you know, and you can draw that out for so long. And for this one, it's like, how about they figure it out and they say, yeah, we want to do this, and that doesn't mean there's not bumps along the way, right? Like there's Jimmy having to deal with the loss of his wife and having to, I'm becoming close or intimate, you know, emotionally with a different woman. That's hard for me. It's hard for my daughter, maybe, you know. And so there's things that bridges that these two people have crossed over the course of the last year and a half. But I think that when you see that, you can see them becoming closer because of it. Now that doesn't mean that, these two are headed in one direction definitively, and that's, you know, it's all, you know, sunshine and roses ahead. But it does mean that when they come up against bumps in the road, I'm hoping to see them, figure things out, you know, and we'll see where it takes them. You know, there's no guarantee of happiness for anyone, especially in a television show. So if there are bumps coming down the road, they'll be handled and whatnot, you know. But we'll see where it takes us. I think that the legacies of David McCallum and Ducky are kind of hand in hand. David always showed up prepared as an actor. He was a student of theater his entire life, and he showed up ready to play every single time. He had his work down, and that sort of preparation, when you work alongside it, bleeds over into everyone else he works with. And the same can be said for Ducky. Ducky was a guy who was meticulous. He always wanted to know the facts, and unlike his counterpart of Gibbs upstairs, Ducky didn't like go by his gut on things. He wanted to know facts. He wanted to know what the evidence said. And also, while doing so, he checked in with the people that he cared about and the people that he loved. You know, you see on this show, the last scene I think that he and I did together was the two of us in a diner, Jimmy talking to him about his feelings for Night, for Jess. And Ducky just listening and saying, well, why can't you just be with her? And Ducky was also there for that. So I think that being there for those that you love, and also being there to make sure that we do our job to the best of our abilities and solve the crimes that will give peace to the families of those who have died, that is the legacy that Ducky leaves behind. This is an important one, I think, not just for us, but also, like, I think one thing that we really recognize is that all of his fans, and there's so many of them, you know, they go far beyond just NCIS, are looking for a way to share in this celebration, but also this grieving process and this this lifting up of a really great guy. And I'm hoping this episode allows people to kind of come together and do that.